G'day everyone. Welcome to this month's seasonal update for March. Today we've got a special guest, Rowan Smith from TAS, so Research Fellow at the Cluster Leader and Feed-Based Environment, has joined us this month. So Rowan will have a chat about the Pasture 365 project that he's running and some of the other things that he's seeing around the state, and then we'll go into our statewide seasonal outlook, looking at the dryland moisture probe. So, without further ado, we'll jump onto Rowan. Thanks for joining us, Rowan. If you just want to just introduce yourself, or give you a bit more information about yourself that I missed out, and give us a bit of an overview of your Pasture 365 project.
Yeah, thanks, Marek. Afternoon, everyone. I think most people now will have seen me about the trap somewhere, but I'm a pasture and forage researcher with Tasmanian Institute of Agriculture, focused mostly on dryland pastures, based in Launceston. A lot of our work has been sort of through the Midlands and Central North over the last few years, and had a strong focus on legumes in pastures. And I guess more recently, there's been a lot of interest in mixed pastures, or certainly introducing, I guess, a few more species into our pasture mixes. So that's, I guess, what Pasture 365, I guess, was aiming at. It has sort of come from a more regenerative sort of angle of sort of suggesting that the more pasture species we have in a pasture, that then makes it more resilient to dry times and the like. So we've implemented 3 focal sites. One at Fosterville, it's on Foster's property at Campbelltown. Another one at Baxter's at Pipers River, and the third one is out at Hagley on the school farm out there. So those focal sites have had a range of pasture treatments in each of those areas. We've tried to take a standard pasture mix for that area and then add diversity to it. So, for instance, in the high rainfall, the medium rainfall site at Pipers River, we started out with the pasture mix being perennial ryegrass and white clover, and just continued to add species to that. So we ended up with treatments that had sort of up to 12 different species in them. Same goes for the other sites at Fosterville. We had Phalaris-based pastures and lucerne and added species from there. So those focal sites have been running a couple of years now, and over a couple of summers, and starting to produce some interesting results.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And I've been lucky enough to put some probes in the site down at Fosterville, before a couple of years ago, in terms of where I come from with soil moisture and plant water uptake, through root uptake, you go, oh, how much is the species going to change in terms of accessing moisture through different parts of the profile? I get skeptical, but after seeing some of the data that's come out of the trial down at Campbelltown, it's been really interesting to see, from my point of view, from the work that I do, how that difference is with the species mix. And also, if anyone's got any questions, please chuck it in the chat group, and we'll make sure we answer them. And if I forget, Fee will make sure that she butts in and answers them, because she is the brains behind this operation. So she'll make sure we keep running smoothly. So back to your trial, Rowan. Could you just give a brief overview of what you've seen? Has anything come out of that? Any trends that have come out of your trial site so far, particularly around how summer played out, and what are you seeing around those regions more broadly?
Yeah, so probably, everyone's probably aware that we've had a reasonably dry summer. And so, for instance, at our Hagley site, from the start of December, I think it was, through into the end of February, I only had 30 mils or something like that. So while it's not unusual to be dry over summer, we also haven't had, a few decent dumps that we normally get. So I think, average would have been more around the 100, 120 mark. So to get 30s probably held things up a bit. The couple of species that we have seen doing well, lucerne, obviously, we're pretty well aware of lucerne's water use efficiency and how it's got the deep tap roots and can tap into moisture at depth. But perhaps one that I hadn't kind of accounted for in the past and probably advocating a bit more for in the future is chicory. It's just its ability to access moisture, handle the heat, like very, very tolerant of heat stress. And I think been some good work that Adam Langworthy did at the Dairy Centre at TIA a few years ago kind of proved that. But its ability to stay green and keep growing over summer has been interesting. That's sort of been the case at all three sites really. I guess the key question for me now is how long that can persist in a pasture, because often the comment back to me is that's only lasted 1 or 2 years. Well, in the site now they've kind of been going 2 years. They're still there and looking pretty good. So it's going to be interesting to see whether they continue to persist. We probably didn't get the rainfall or dumps of rainfall to keep cocksfoot going. So that was probably a species that can kind of react to fits and spurts of rainfall over the summer, and we probably didn't really get that certainly at Hagley. We did get it at Fosterville, a couple of 20 mils through February, I think, late January, early February. So we did see it react a bit there, but we know that can react to summer rain when we get it. But in a dry season, it's been pretty much the chicory and lucerne being the only things that are growing at that time of year.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. And so if we then come and look to autumn and the autumn break that we all talk about and wait for, what have you seen in terms of these autumn rains that we've had so far? Have you your trial sites, but also just around the state? What have you seen so far from that March rainfall?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, like I spent a few days on Flinders last week, Merrick, and it looked pretty good over there. Like that, they've actually had a start to autumn, and there's feed there growing, and while they could use another rainfall now, like that, it seems well ahead compared to the central north. I think the northeast is going okay. Far northeast is going okay as well, but just through the central north, it's still really dry. I don't know whether you got data there, but it's still really dry, and the rainfall events that we have had have sort of got a germination of subterranean clover, which we know, this time of year we see that. But just walking around the paddocks, I'm seeing that subclover drying off and dying. So, in some ways it's been a bit of a false break. Through the central north, I don't think we've had an autumn break yet.
Yeah, and I was looking, and we'll go over this later in the with the seasonal update. But I think the data of some of the phone calls, and I have a few people on the ground that I do a bit of ground truthing with, that I feed on the ground, that I'll give a call and just to make sure to ground truth the data I'm looking at. And Rowan's one of these guys, and the reason why he's on today, because I gave him a call. I was like, you know what, I think you should just come on rather than me just trying to be smart off the things that he knows. But in terms of looking what you're saying on Flinders, I think we can see that there in terms of they've had a good autumn. We can see that they've had that rainfall recently, and it's been, not only have they had rainfall, but it's been utilised by the plant. If we go to Hagley, like you're saying, it's that kind of false autumn. They've had rain, but it's been used. But essentially, we're back to where we were, closer back to where we were in February. And then if we look up in the northeast, same thing. Fairly nice around the northwest, but as I'll go through in detail later on, it's pretty much just flatlined through the southern Midlands. And I think the main thing from what I'm hearing is that barley grass is the main thing that's kind of persisting at the moment. Cocksfoot's hasn't really kicked on. What about subclover? That's something that usually starts to germinate around this time of year, and with a couple of rains. What are you seeing with the clovers?
Yeah, certainly like with the subclover, that's something that will germinate on a rainfall at this time of year. I think here at Mount Pleasant, even we sort of had a rain maybe 2 weeks ago, and I'm walking over it now. Those little subclover plants are curling up and yellow, and they're pretty much dead now. So it is the season for those kind of false breaks. It's not unusual, and we will get another germination on another rainfall. But it's just, I guess those early sort of 10 mil rainfall events or the like really haven't led to too much at this stage.
So, and this is one which, you see these rains come along, and especially driving down the highway, and you see that beautiful green tinge, and everything looks wonderful. Is there any key indications that you use in terms of digging a little bit deeper to see, well, what is actually just a bit of a false break and a green tinge that can trick us, or something that's a bit more substantial that's going to lead to prolonged pasture growth, or get us onto that give us a bit of a feed wedge that we're going to see coming into winter? Is there any key things that you look for to help you give a bit more of an indication of what's going on?
Well, certainly that whether that sub survives is a good indication of certainly surface or very high in the profile soil moisture. And then if that's getting used up, we probably haven't got the deep the soaking rains of pushing moisture deeper down into the profile. I think that's getting all used up pretty quickly. But when you start to see growth in the around, particularly in the Campbelltown area, for instance, when Phalaris is actually starting to move, which is normally a bit later than everything else, that's probably an indicator that the season's changing, and you get any survival of that initial round of clover germination is probably a good indicator as well.
Yeah, great. And so we're talking about established pastures here. What about renovating pastures? So pasture renovations. What's something what do you need to consider about if you're thinking about renovating pastures, and should there be a plan B if the season doesn't eventuate how we would like it to?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing to raise, Marek. Particularly, ideally at this point, producers have thought about pasture renovation. We're thinking about going back into a long-term perennial that sort of decision making and preparation had hopefully started over 12 months ago, and they're in a position now to either direct drill into a clean paddock, or into a cultivated sprayed out and cultivated pasture. Hopefully that preparation's been done, but in saying that, particularly having moisture in the soil to be able to get things to germinate, it's pretty critical. So thinking of the Midlands now, we're starting to get towards an end of time where I'd be comfortable putting perennials in. Like, we've probably got another 3 weeks or so if we don't get rain, then we're pushing things quite deep into the season. And I'm thinking of it from a point of view of particularly getting the perennials going in the pasture mix. So whatever perennial grass is going in, and also any perennial legumes, those things are generally very slow to establish. And if we start to get into cooling soil temperatures and also less daylight, those things start to work against you. I think it's okay. Certainly no issue if you're irrigating and irrigating a pasture up. That's all fine. But I think if we continue to get prolonged dry spell, if you were thinking about putting a brand new pasture in, probably get to the point sometime when you need to say, well, that's not going to work. Can I go with an annual? Can I go with a winter cereal, or a grazing type cereal, or that kind of thing, and just try and get some fodder for winter, and sort of the risk of a perennial pasture fail on a poor autumn is pretty high. So they're the things that I'd be thinking about. What's plan B if we don't get rain the next 3 weeks and I can't get my perennial pasture in the ground? That's a good question to ask yourself.
Yeah. So for those who are looking to then renovate a pasture next season, if you're looking to integrate a different range of some different species, or some species in the mix, you mentioned chicory and things like that. What are some of the key things you need to consider with the pasture species mix for a perennial pasture species mix?
The weed background, probably one of if not the most critical, one of the most critical. Having a look at what things are germinating now or over the next few weeks, and so if you've got, a big amount of annual grass weeds, for instance, getting control of those over the winter, so that they don't, or a smaller number of them start popping up next time round, and then having a look at your broadleaf weeds if they're going to be, if you've got a lot of broadleaf weeds there that are going to be an issue. Certainly, once you go into, some of the more complicated pasture mixes where you've got, a couple of legumes and different herbs and the like, you start to run into a lack of chemistry to be able to selectively take those out once a new pasture is up and going. So preparation around those weeds, and also the other thing would be just having a look at getting a soil test done and having a look at particularly pH. If you're going to make any adjustments to pH, now would be a good time to do it as part of a crop, a rotation crop going through and trying to incorporate lime, for instance, would be a good thing to do. So trying to set that soil up so it's ready to go, and not limiting whatever new pasture goes in this time next year.
And I know, so down at the Fosterville site, there's Phalaris just in terms of the seed bank in the soil. How do you, when you've got just a historic seed bank that's the region has down there, how is that something you try to fight, or is it something that you just go, look, it's just going to be part of my perennial pasture no matter what? And is there things you can do to have that integrated, or things that you can sow with it to make a good mix there?
Yeah, it's good. It's an interesting point. I think where we've tried to quickly try and spray Phalaris out and then go over the top with other things, that we've run into difficulties doing that. I think having a look at the existing degraded pasture gives you a lot of clues about what will persist long term. So if you've already got, if the Phalaris pasture, for instance, is 50% degraded, perhaps just thinking about that and just topping up with more Phalaris. Just perhaps thinking about what legume you could get into that mix as well. But having a look at the existing pasture gives you a lot of clues as to what will persist going forward. So it's difficult to, if you've got well-established Phalaris plants there, to then come over the top with some other grass instead of the Phalaris. That's difficult, I think.
Yeah, and so that's a really turning in those thoughts in my head, just because you mentioned chicory and lucerne. I know chicory's all the rage at the moment, and it sounds sexy to be able to incorporate, especially those legumes into your species. How much of it is just working with your climate, working with your rainfall, and knowing what's going with something that's a safer option rather than trying to be a bit too experimental, and just having it fall in a heap? Where do you kind of what do you need to consider there, and what are the things to think about?
I'm not against experimentation, Marek. I'd be just biting off a little bit if I was going to sow a big paddock down anyway, and I sowed 90% to the mix that I know is going to work, and maybe just at the end of the last run putting in a bit of an experimental mix to have a look. But it's still probably going to be based on the key grass that is going to persist in that area. So for that area, Phalaris or coxswain, and just modifying it a little bit. That'd be the way I'd go about it.
Yeah, great. No, perfect. Now I want to jump onto, so a lot of part of the states have had a fairly dry spell, and when I say dry spell, I'm talking about that last 2.5 years. If we do get that rain, so some areas have had that rain, and areas that do get that rain, how do you make the most of those autumn rains while managing your grazing? Are there any key things there that you've seen work, or that you recommend, grazing wise, to maximise the rainfall that has fallen and pasture growth that comes along with it?
Yeah, I think the idea and I think Simon Foster's actually on. So he's been one that's good at it. But you know, if you've got that ability to containment feed, that certainly allows pastures that are rebounding to get away. Like when we think about the plant, when it starts to send up new leaves, it's kind of mobilising any sort of carbohydrate or energy within that plant that it's still got left, and so it's pulling that from the root, trying to grow new leaves. And if we're straight into that, chewing that off, well, that's lost energy to the plant. And so if you continue to do that before replenishing those reserves, you know, that's a pretty quick way to pasture degradation in my mind. So I think any strategy that you've got to be able to containment feed, or certainly supplementary feed in a smaller area of the farm, and let, you know, your best pastures get away. So that's a pretty good strategy, I think, Marek. Remembering that, you know, those plants have pretty much got to, you know, for instance, in perennial ryegrass, it's got to get to 3.5 leaf stage before, you know, all that energy is replaced back in the root. So yeah, while it's tempting once you start to see that green growing out in the paddocks, if you can hold off and then hold off a little bit longer, when you kind of think you're right, giving it another couple of weeks, certainly you're going to have greater longevity in your pastures. You know, if you've got pastures that you're getting ready to renovate and you're happy to kind of sacrifice those and push some supplementary feed into those, you know, that'd be the way to go. I'd be protecting my best pastures.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, yeah, so it's that long term, from some of the things you've been saying, that long term in terms of, you know, it's perennial pastures and making sure you have that good I guess robustness in your grazing. Long term planning seems to be key there to make sure that, you know, you've got going forward what you're renovating, when you start thinking about it, when you start planning, and how you integrate that into everything seems to be a big part there. So I
think the other thing to keep an eye on, and you're probably better to talk to this, Marek, but when we do get, you know, that first couple of big rainfalls, where's that moisture going? Is it, you know, on a flat cracking clay? I see it disappear down the crack, and it takes a while for those sort of soils to swell and bring moisture back to the surface. So preferential flow of rainfall, if it's running off the paddock or running down cracks, is it, you know, understanding that moisture profile will give you an idea about whether that sort of upper part of the soil profile has got the ability to keep plants growing or stay moist and keep plants growing for the next few weeks until the next rain. So that's probably your area.
100%. Yeah. It's, and you know, that's the kind of thing that I always bang on about, is know your soils. So yeah, how your soils behave, but then once you understand how your soils behave, you can then get a great understanding about what your rainfall's worth to this idea of, you know, an autumn break being 25 mils before Australia Day, but over a couple, whatever it is. I think it's such a nebulous term in terms of, well, it's a number, but how does it actually result in pasture growth, which is what we want to get out of it here in Tassie. I think we get thrown off as well by, you know, the farmers on the mainland, where they're using that for a lot of their dryland cropping, or in terms of our autumn break and how it's kicking on. And yeah, so some parts of the paddock, some parts of your farm might, and Fosterville again is another great example, because it has some, you know, that variety. It has windblown sands, it has black cracking clays, and then it has your typical, you know, your doleritic clays through there, and with a sandy loam topsoil, and understanding where that soil sits in the profile. So understanding what that rainfall is worth is key. So yeah, being able to mix that understanding, combine that understanding of your soil type and water movement and key indicators that you can see in your pasture species and how they're responding to it. Yeah, the more you understand it, I think, yeah, just you get greater strength. Now I've taken up more of your time than I said, well, but I just have one more question for you now. Nitrogen fertilizer is a hot topic at the moment. Just last one is to tell me about legumes and adding to the mix. In terms of what your points are around promoting legumes to your pasture mix.
Yeah, well, I think we're back on the back on the nitrogen roller coaster again. I think it peaked a couple of years, 2-3 years ago, and came back, and now we're starting to peak again. So I guess any time where you can get nitrogen for free, I think that's a good idea. So if we're thinking about our pasture legumes, they can play, a pretty big role if we can grow a ton of dry matter of a legume. That's going to be able to put sort of 25 to 40 kilos of nitrogen into per hectare of nitrogen into our pastures, and that helps obviously the legume to grow initially, but also grass. So yeah, anything that we can be doing to advantage or certainly help legume growth, now is a good time to be thinking about that. If you are going to be applying fertilizer over the next 6 months, make sure you get a soil test for a start. That's a key thing. And phosphorus, potassium, those are the kind of key nutrients for legumes. They will advantage, certainly give them a tick along and help with that nitrogen fixation. So those are and probably pH as well as the other thing. So if you are kind of restricted in your nitrogen budget spend, you're going to get the benefit of those other nutrients as far as pasture growth. That'll certainly help the legume side, and you'll get a bit out of that. I guess this time of year, Mark, we also get a bit of nitrogen being mobilised from the decay of all the plant material over summer, and bacteria and the microorganisms starting to break that down. So we do get a bit of end release at this time of year anyway. But yeah, if nitrogen's going to be tight for you this year, perhaps just keeping an eye on how you can advantage that legume portion of the pasture, and certainly thinking about it going ahead in getting pH and some of those soil factors right for future sowings as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I think we're going to be on this nitrogen roller coaster regardless of whether the war ends or the like. It's going to fluctuate up and down.
Yep.
In years to come anyway. So they're good tricks to know.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you very much. And I saw that you've posted a link to developing drought-resistant pastures in the chat. So I've got that there. Share that there. Do you want to speak about that?
Well, that's just the Pasture 365 if you want any more information on that. And also been posting a few little videos from when I'm out at the sites as well, giving sort of updates on what's happening and what I'm seeing. So they're added to the website and the like as well.
And I'd get my fix of you out in the paddock on Facebook. So if you like them on Facebook and have a bit of a look, I think they're a great little update there. And it's put the pressure on me from Fee to start doing videos in the paddock as well. But I don't think it will as well as you, mate. So fantastic, mate. I really appreciate you coming on. It's that this is the component that where I don't have, is not my strength. So for you to be able to add that into what I'm seeing around the place, and the soil moisture data is fantastic. So really appreciate it, and recommend people to chase it up and have a bit of a look, because there's some great things coming out of it. So thanks, Ron. Really appreciate it.
No worries. I'll sit through this next bit with you, and if there's any questions at the end, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers. Righto. So we'll now go on to our hang on, I was just a bit better. I'll now go on to the rest of our statewide update, a seasonal snapshot. So if we start in the northwest, if we look up around Woolnorth on our sandier soils, we can see that we've had a couple of rainfall events up that way, but still looking similar to where we were. A little bit wetter than where we were last year. That has come around from the soil not being, the pastures not drawing up that moisture at depth as they did the last couple of years, because our spring extended a bit later than what it did the last couple of years. So you can see things are starting to slow down there instead of the uptake. If we go a bit further inland to higher rainfall, but also heavier soil type, we got here at Edith Creek. We can see here we're pretty similar in terms of where we are same time last year. What we are though is getting that these rainfalls here that are making the difference that extend things on. So this year we didn't get those rainfalls through January, February, whereas compared to last year, you can see you got a spike there, and that difference there in that soil moisture, that's what helps drive that growth and helps continue it on. But we're looking pretty similar same time last year through there. And Yola, as we go a bit further south, we can see here now we're starting to get some rainfall, and this is where soil type does start to come into it. So in terms of, you're listing your kids on behaviour, some of the best behaved, some of your worst behaved. In terms of soils, your red ferrosols, they're your best behaved. They do what they expect you expect them to do. They go to bed when you expect them to go to bed, and all those kind of things. Well, this is the water moves the way you expect it to move through the profile. So you can see here we're getting these rainfall events, these large, I'll term them as skyscrapers. We're getting infiltration. We can see we've had that margin. So similar to what Ron was saying, that northwest coast, we're getting that bit of autumn break. We're getting a response. We can see pastures are being used up here, but still, even though it's the best, it's our best behaving soil, we can see here understanding that soils. It doesn't matter if you pour a heap of soil on; they've gone through a dry process. They're dry. The soils are dry, so they're structure has changed in terms of their macropause ability or their pores ability to hold on to moisture. So even though we've got that, it was at an inch of rain there, it didn't fill up. We think of it in our head that soils get the fill capacity in the top 10 centimeters or the top part, then it goes down to 20 and 30. That inch there, it filled the top 10 centimeters a little bit, but it bypassed it, a lot of it to the 20 and down to the 30. So you can see here again, even in our ferrosols, we need consistent rain to make sure that we're wetting up our profile uniformly through the, to depth. So we can see here, I've put this little shaded area through here to see that the rainfall's fallen and it's being used. So it's that gap and it's not going down to our previous point. So there we've got number one, we can look at that rainfall. So that we've got the amount of rainfall that's fallen, but we can also now look at the soil moisture and go, okay, that rainfall's fallen. It's gone into the profile where our roots are using that moisture up down here. And it's there and our plants are using it. We can see our plants are using it, but we haven't exhausted it. So in terms of how long our pastures are going to persist from the rainfall we've had, I would say we've got a bit of persistence there. If we look then, go a bit further down to sassafras, we can see that again we've got that rainfall there, nice infiltration. Again, it hasn't reached fill capacity because that's our fill capacity there of that top 10 centimeters. But we can see here again we've got that increase in soil moisture. We haven't plateaued out yet. So if we were to say, look, no more rain, we will get back to that point, in about that week, 2 week mark. Okay, so that's that. Looking at the rain, looking at the numbers, the amount of rainfall fallen, looking at how it's gone infiltrated into the soil based on your soil type. But also then number one, it's being used, so that's great. If it wasn't, then it's not autumn break, essentially it's put into refill. And so then, you can see there that it's been utilised and it's how much it can give you. We go to the northeast. Oak Bank we brought up earlier from what Warren was saying, so that's similar to what we're seeing in that northwest coast. We've had that rainfall there, which is infiltrated nicely. In terms of this soil here, near Pipers River, it does have a bit of a crack. It does tend to crack, but we've still got moisture in that top profile. But again, you look at these lines and you can see here, we've had a spike. We've got water used by the plant, but it's plateaued out. The reason why, so we look at that and go, this is where understanding the data we're seeing is important. We might then go, but we've got a differential here so that means there's water available. But yes, if we look down at the subsoil, that water, some of that water's gone down into this part of the profile. That's not going to be available to the plant quickly in terms of your autumn break. So yes, it gave us a little bit of top moisture in the top 10, 20 centimetres, and that's been utilised, but then it's plateaued out because the rest of that gap there is in the subsoil. So understanding where your water's sitting and seeing that signature that's coming from plant water use is important. So I would have said that, if we were to break it up, I would have said maybe 40% of this rainfall here would contributed to autumn growth, and the other 60% is winter refill. So these are the kind of little key indicators that we see that can help you assess how long that pasture growth is going to persist for. And so then that little bit of rainfall here again, it just gets gets getting used up, but how long until? So really focusing on that to give you a bit of indication. So there's little things that we're starting to pick up. The more and more data we get to see how you and understanding how your soil behaves. If you go then to Ringarooma, so your red ferrocell, that uniform infiltration we can see here. Now, this is one where I haven't got eyes on this site, but you can see that we haven't got that downward trend in water use. So whether that pasture is just slowed right down, whether it's a ryegrass it's slowed right down and hasn't been used, or it's just been too dry here, and so your pasture just shut right down, and it hasn't, and it's not a species that is responding to that rainfall as quickly as other species might. So again, you look at that and go, well, yes, I've had rain, but is the species mix actually responding to that rain? And the soil and that soil moisture curve can indicate that as well. And if I look, and just looking at it now, we've had similar rainfalls in the last three years, and we've got a similar response in terms of that curve. So looking at that pasture, so it's a ryegrass pasture, which is the dryland part of Adairia and Ringarooma. We've had similar curves. So I'm going, well, in future years, if we get another pattern like this, any rain that we get in March, is it irrelevant to our autumn growth? We're starting to get data that might suggest that it is. So picking up these little subtle signs can help you understand your systems a bit better. And if we go up to Kananga, which is up around that Tomahawk region, those sandy soils, we can see here that sandy soil, so they're filling from the top up. Again, that was being used pretty quick smart. So in terms of the rainfall that's fallen, and as Brian mentioned, they had some nice rainfall, but they need follow up. This is a key reason, this is a key illustration why we've pretty much flatlined, we've plateaued right out, we've got rain, but that's just all been used up. So we're pretty much where we started. So we need that rain to kick that pasture growing a bit more again. So a summary for the northeast and northwest coast. Soil moisture the same at the similar point, same time as last year. And it does all depend on the efficacy of the rain events and your soil type. So this is one where, to what we were speaking to earlier in the first half, it's important to see how the pastures have responded and where the moisture is. So understanding those key signs, responsive signs of your pastures, and having a bit of a dig in the profile to see where that moisture is. Now, I pulled Coal Valley up earlier than usual because there's some really interesting things I want to talk about now at the site of Daisy Bank, just outside of Richmond, to explain to you how it's not just the amount of rain, but also the rainfall, how it falls. So this is Daisy Bank now, and in terms of the south, got some nice rain in terms of a couple of days of overcast, and they got some rain that came through. Now I'll just highlight this. So this, I'll go backwards. So this period here, I've just zoomed in on this one here. So we can see here we've got a little bit of rain, so half an inch through there. Okay, so they got used up pretty quickly. Then what we've got is this half an inch here again, similar jump in the amount of soil moisture, but then we got another 12 mils, and we can see how it's jumped up again, and how that jump there is disproportionate to the amount of rainfall we got compared to here. One thing that has had an effect, which you wouldn't think, is this 1 millimeter here. So the fact that we've got this rainfall here that has then has preceded this 1 mil, that mil, or that slow rainfall, or that rainfall prolonged over a number of days as opposed to just one day, and that's what I refer to these skyscrapers as. So you see these big days which get a dump of rain, they're not as effective in infiltrating into the soil profile. So if you get 24 mils in one day, as opposed to 24 mils spread over 2 days, is a lot more effective than having that just over 1 day. And even just having an overcast, miserly, rubbish day preceding that can have all the impact on making sure your moisture goes into the profile. So again, understanding what your rainfall is worth, the number, you got to look past the number. So if we go into the Northern Midlands now, so just looking at that, I just want to highlight that one. So when we see these skyscrapers and we see minimal response, that can be the reason why. Okay, so if we look at Parkham, which is just outside Elizabethtown, we can see we've got that rain, and we're looking pretty similar to the same time last week. And again, this is a dryland dairy, so you got those pasture species that are more, you focus on that ryegrass that aren't, responding to that rain, because they don't respond to the rain as quickly as they like to soak a bit longer than other species, as Jason Lynch likes to term it. If we go to Meander, now they had a little bit of rain, and talking to a couple of guys out there, it's looking pretty good there in terms of their lighter soil types. This probe here is on river flat, so it's a heavier soil type that is prone to cracking. As you can see here, it's just bypass our top 20 centimetres. And what we're seeing is pretty good growth in the lighter soil types. Now, they had rainfall that was a bit localised there, but they do need more to go on with. And in the heavier soil types, we're not quite seeing that kick on. So again, this is where you're making sure you know where your water's going. So if you go to Hagley, pulled up this one earlier again, like if we draw a line there to here, we can see we've got that rainfall. It's been utilised again. This is a red ferrocell. This site here again, it's bypassing. Our soil's dried out to the point we want to see. It's going to take multiple rainfalls to get us back up to this point in terms of maximising the amount of water that's available to our plant, but it's getting utilised pretty quickly. So we need some follow-up, like Rowan was saying, to make sure that we're utilising what we're seeing here. And then if we go a bit further out down the Longford area, we can see those skyscrapers, they have a little bit of effect, but not too much. So we're pretty dry compared to the same times last year. And then if we go on to some of our sites, which are some of our other sites on, down south, which have that sandy loam soil, that's just pretty much just flat line. And we need to see a nice few days of soaking rain to make sure that we just break down that crusting or break down that hydrophobicity to make sure that we get some infiltration. Now, this is a conversation that I had recently with someone down the Bothwell way, and it is so imperative understanding that yes, we've got, we go through this cycle in winter, but understanding that dry seasons, how they can impact pasture growth and not just pasture growth, sorry, but also how your pasture holds on in terms of coming into the next season, how that moisture at depth is so important for your pasture persistence. Will it die out because it's just been too dry a season, or do you have that stored subsoil moisture where it can use to persist, so when it does come out of spring, it has got a bit of a oomph, for lack of a scientific term, behind it to get going. And I've seen a fair few sites around the place where in the perennial species where they just haven't recovered because with those excessively dry years that we've had. And so if you've got that lack of ground cover, you've got exposed soil. Exposed soil means you've got lower infiltration rate. So then the rain that does fall is less likely to fall, is less likely to infiltrate these soils. So we're starting to get into those regions here, so south of Longford. So Northern Midland summary, it's similar soil, same time as last year, which we expect, but we're just hoping for that rain to just, kind of start to ramp things up. So we've had less rainfall compared to the northwest and the northeast coast. So we need a good follow-up to get things going, and understanding your soils in terms of any soils with dry, sandy loam in the topsoil, they need prolonged rain to wet up. And half an inch here or 15 mils there is not going to do much. All that's doing is running off the surface, and it's going to your lower-lying parts of your paddock. So they might green up, or they will green up. But in terms of your undulating paddocks, you're going to see that localised greening across the paddocks. Southern Midlands, if we look at Lewisham, which is sandier soil, so wind-blown sands. We haven't had the soil, we haven't had the rain really to put any moisture into the profile, and realistically those soils, when they dry out, they can turn really hydrophobic. St. Peter's Pass, same thing, but this one here is a site that's very prone to cracking, so any rainfall that we do get that infiltrates, it will go straight down. And I think the autumn break here is something that we're very, I don't think will happen now. Stonehouse towards the east coast, looking pretty similar. Soils are very similar there as well. So in the Derwent Valley, it's pretty similar there as well in terms of what we're seeing. Yes, we've had these rainfall events. So Dungrove, another wind-blown sand, we're seeing that again. We need to see those multiple days of rainfall, to not these spaced out days. We want to see a bit more rain there, clumped together. Weather on your heavier soil types. Again, similar to last year. Again, those skyscrapers aren't being utilised, and a bit further towards ooze. Again, you see that 2 days together, you can see a little bit of a response because that first rain has broken it down a little bit. But again, it's not massive because we've gone through that prolonged dry period. So these rainfall that occurs in summer can have a massive effect in terms of how efficient infiltration of those subsequent rainfalls can be. So that summary for the Southern Midlands and Derwent Valley, again, similar time, same time as last year. there's a nice tinge about, but that's about it. So don't be caught out by that. And again, I think back to what Rowan said in terms of, looking around containment feeding. If you do see your pastures starting to take off a little bit, at least give them the chance to get a bit more growth around them. And again, like similar to that Northern Midlands, any soils with those sandy loamy topsoils, we need prolonged rain. So go through and actually dig down when you get a rain, see where it's gone. If it's hard to push your shovel into the ground, that's a pretty good indication that there's not much moisture in there to start with. But actually have a look, see what your root's doing, have a look at your pores, see where your moisture's sitting in that profile. If we go to the east coast of Fingal Valley, it's pretty much going to be same as what I've been speaking about in terms of we're pretty similar to where we were same time last year, and they haven't had much rain at all compared to the rest of the state. So that Fingal Valley as well, we're just sitting pretty dry and very different compared to those seasons. So the last 3 seasons, and when I say the persistence of pasture species based on these dry seasons, that's what we're talking about. These last 3 years, the 2 previous years before that were absolute crackers in terms of those spring rainfalls. They were perfectly timed. They weren't leading to waterlogging, and it was just a really nice spaced out rainfall. But the last 3 years, it's this that has that impact on that subsoil moisture this time of year. That means how your pastures come out of that season the following year. That's really important. So the summary for East Coast, it's same time last year. It's similar to that Derwent Valley. There's a nice tinge, but that's about it. And yeah, same old from what I said. Now, if we go to the islands, if we go to Flinders. We can see here similar what Ryan was talking about. So then they got that autumn break, but it's been used up. So they need that follow-up. Okay. So yep, they'll persist for a little bit, but really we need that little bit of rainfall just to keep going with what we've seen. So that's on some of the heavier soil types and some of the lighter soil types, those nicer structured soils. We can see that those rainfalls have had a nice impact there. They've been utilised up, but where's that rainfall gone? And then where's that how far are we? So we're coming, a week away from being at that same point as when those rain came. So again, estimating how things are going through there and what rain's going to follow up. If we go to King, similar tale there. We've had a couple of rainfall events in the top 10 centimetres. So this is on our semi-coastal country, so our lighter soil. So it's infiltrating that top 10 and it's staying there. So it's available to our pastures straight away. But again, if we don't have follow-up rain, it's a week or 2 of getting back to that flat line. And on our Pagara loam, so on our heavier soil types, it's being captured just. You can see that slight increase, but again, this depends on where your pasture species are at the moment. If it's rye dominant, is it just shut up shop for the season, or do you have other pet species in the mix? And again, if I look at the last 3 years and the pattern, they're doing something pretty similar. So I'm going, okay. And this paddock here has lucerne in it as well. So that lucerne, is going to kick on. So we can see that pattern with the rainfall that we've had on our semi-coastal countries that has lucerne in the mix. We can see that it's getting used up. We can see that similar rainfall patterns. Whereas in these species here, we can see that that's right. We've pretty much shut up shop for the year. So understanding where we're sitting. So that's a bit of refill there. So summary for King and Flinders. So good soil moisture, creeping above compared to last year. There is good autumn growth about, but we need that follow-up rain. This is something that just to keep an eye on for King Island. We need to exceed that summer and autumn rainfall averages to start getting us back to normal. So just an update. So January, pretty much no rain. February and March, we're on track in terms of averages, but I'd love to see a couple of bars that are sitting, April sitting above there, May or June sitting above, that 125, 150 mil mark, just to get us back to a wet winter, just to get us back to, what we call as the inverted commas normal. So our key takeaways from today. So there have been some rainfall, particularly north of the state, contributing to pasture growth. So things that you want to talk to your agronomists about is making sure you're having a look at when you want to those perennial pasture species. Is it the right time to go? Is there a plan B that you need to put in place that Raoul mentioned? So we've had that rainfall, but is it substantial growth or is it a green tinge? So have a chat to your agronomist, have a bit of a look around, dig some holes, have a look at those, have a look at your pastures and have a look if there's any of those key indicators to tell you whether it's going to keep going on or whether it's just, that green tinge. And if it's growing, it is using moisture. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but it's growing, so it's using moisture. So if it doesn't rain, that moisture is going to run out at some time. Just because we've got our autumn break, just because that number, that 25 mils before Australia Day or Anzac Day or whatever it is has been reached, it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that, yep, done. Our autumn's come and we're happy, right? That water's being used. Know your soil type and what rain is worth to you. So after the rains that we've had, go out and have a look at the low-lying parts of your paddock. Go have a look at the heavier soil type parts of your paddock and try and understand that variability that you've got. And when it comes to irrigated pastures, scale that back to about 20 mils a week now. So our evapotranspirations are around 2.5 to 3. And be aware that's a pasture that's, a 10 centimetre full grain pasture. Okay, so it might be even less for your lower pastures, for your pastures that have been grazed a bit lower down. So 20 mils a week irrigation, and of course minus rainfall. So for example, if this week or last week, we're at 20 mils a week and we had 10 mils of rainfall, obviously that's 10 mils of irrigation to put on. So that's all for this month. Thanks for joining us again. Thanks to Rowan. Really appreciate you coming on. And any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out and follow up. And any questions for Rowan, feel free to track him down or flick them our way and we can pass them on. So great to have you with us. And we'll see you next month. Cheers.